My wife, who is 37 years old, has completely ruined our marriage. 4.5 months ago, she started a new job, and with that job came new friends. I am 36 years old and I didn't like these new friends of hers at all. They were all strong feminists and always acted like they were victims of something. They would get angry at you if you opened a door for them, but they would also get mad if you didn't. It felt like there was no right way to behave around them. At first, I tried to laugh off the situation, thinking it was just a phase. But over the last 2 months, I noticed some troubling changes in my wife. We have been married for 11 years and we have 2 children, a 10-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old son. As time passed, the problems grew worse. My wife began to accuse me of all sorts of crazy things. She claimed I was somehow evil just because I am a man, suggesting that men have oppressed women throughout history. It was frustrating. Things I would do for her that she normally appreciated suddenly turned into arguments. I tried to be patient and understanding, but it was nonsensical. In the end, I would often find myself saying, "I haven't done anything bad towards you. The only thing I'm guilty of is loving you." After saying this, she would usually just murmur something and then the next day, she would start the same argument again but with different points. About 5 weeks ago, I started to feel something was very wrong. One night, she came home late without telling me she would be late. I couldn't get her on the phone, and when she finally came home, she seemed distant and cold. The next day, she brushed off my concerns, saying I was being controlling and reading too much into things. This pattern continued several times, and I became worried. I attempted to check her phone, but I didn't find anything clear. Still, I sensed that she had deleted a lot of her messages. Eventually, I discovered a chat with one of her new friends where they talked about how my wife would approach me to ask for an open relationship. At that moment, I understood that my instincts were right, she was cheating. On what turned out to be the second Monday of December, when our kids were at their grandparents' house for Christmas, my wife tried to start a conversation with me during breakfast. It felt like she was casually bringing up the topic of an open relationship as if it was just a random thought. I was ready for her, having prepared myself for this moment. I had been reading a lot on Reddit about similar situations and I knew that there was little chance of saving the marriage. My main goal was to protect my self-esteem and my kids. I didn't yell or scream, instead, I went into a serious interrogation mode. Up until that point, she had been somewhat cocky, but that confidence faded when she saw my expression. I demanded to know who she was seeing and she pretended to act innocent, as if she didn't understand what I was asking. I told her that if she wanted to talk about our relationship, she needed to be honest. I warned her that if she lied, there was no point in continuing the conversation. I could tell she was hiding something. I pressed her for answers, insisting, "Who is the guy?" She hesitated and finally said there were 2 men she had been with during one-night stands while out with her friends. I asked her for their names, if they were married, if she had protected herself, and more. She revealed that both men were married and had children. On top of that, she told me she was planning to sleep with someone at her work. Each detail felt like another blow to my trust and our marriage. She was planning to sleep with a coworker, someone referred to as a cog, and she made it clear that she intended to go through with this. She justified her actions by saying it was good for her and insisted that I had no right to try to control her. I couldn't help but question her about this coworker. I asked for his name and learned that he was married. Despite his marriage, she claimed they were in an open relationship, which she seemed to think was similar to what she wanted for us. She then said she would set me up with some of her friends, mentioning that one of them was particularly interested in me. This left me completely baffled. I had seen this friend before and had zero interest in her. In fact, I wouldn't even consider dating her. I made it clear that I was not interested. When I asked for her phone, she showed me the pattern to unlock it and then went to the bathroom. Seizing the moment, I locked myself in my office. When she returned and found me gone, she started banging on the door, clearly panicked. During that time, I used recovery software on her phone to look for deleted content and found a lot of hurtful evidence. I also installed a spying app to gather more information. After about 30 minutes, I came out, handed her back her phone, and told her to leave. She didn't take it well. There was a lot of arguing, but I kept my responses to a minimum, only answering with single words. She didn't seem to be remorseful at all. Instead, she yelled that I was being controlling and holding her back, claiming that this was typical behavior from men. She accused me of never having loved her and insisted that she had every right to pursue her interests, expecting me to accept it without question. Throughout all of this, I chose not to engage in a full argument. I simply focused on packing her belongings while she continued to circle around me, shouting. Eventually, we reached the front door, and I stood there silently until she wore herself out. In the end, she reluctantly agreed to go to her parents' house. As she was leaving, I told her she was single now and free to do whatever she wanted. I added that I wouldn't be trying to control her anymore and informed her that my lawyer would be in touch in January. When she turned to respond, I slammed and locked the door behind her. Later, I watched from a distance as she discussed the situation with her friends. They seemed to be encouraging her, telling her how strong she was and insisting that she deserved better than me. They dismissed my threats, saying I wouldn't follow through. One of her friends even suggested that if necessary, she could accuse me of domestic abuse. This friend shared how she had managed to take everything from her ex-husband by making such accusations. This left me deeply concerned, prompting me to order cameras for my house because I realized I needed to document everything. What I witnessed was astonishing. Despite never having threatened her in any way, she began messaging her affair partner to arrange a meeting, and they decided to meet at a hotel. I was completely stunned by her actions. In a moment of determination, I went online to find the affair partner's wife. It didn't take long for me to locate her on Facebook, where I sent her a friend request. Upon being accepted, I immediately shared everything, including the hotel meeting. The wife expressed her gratitude and hung up the phone. A few hours later, I received a video from her. She had gone to the motel and confronted both of them. The shouting was intense, and it was clear this wasn't the first time her husband had cheated. She expressed her anger and hurt, making it clear that she had previously set boundaries regarding infidelity. Then, she walked into the room and recorded my wife getting dressed on the edge of the bed. The moment I saw that video, I felt physically sick. The other woman's reaction was immediate. She slapped my wife and unleashed a torrent of insults. It was at that moment that I sent a message to my wife, telling her that I had seen the video and that I never wanted her near me again. It felt as if she was treating our situation like a competition, where in her mind, she was somehow winning. Her perception of reality seemed completely skewed. I struggled to understand her mindset as she appeared unaware that we were in the process of getting divorced. In an effort to clarify the situation, I logged into my wife's family WhatsApp group and informed them of our impending divorce due to her infidelity. I thanked them for welcoming me into their family before disconnecting from the group. I received several calls and messages from them afterward, but I chose not to read or respond. I simply didn't have the energy to engage any further. I reached out to my parents and shared everything that had transpired. My father had sent a message to my wife, letting her know that she would not be welcome for Christmas this year. Currently, I am staying at my parents' house, where I have also spoken with my boss. He generously agreed to give me time off from work until mid-January so that I can take the time I need to sort everything out. During this difficult period, I've been keeping an eye on my wife's increasingly frantic conversations with her new friends. It seems that she has not yet realized the severity of the situation. She has lost her family, and our marriage is effectively over. The friends she has turned to, along with her affair partner, do not genuinely care about her well-being. Despite everything, she has been sending me numerous messages. She even showed up at my parents' home, insisting that she should be allowed to join us for Christmas. My father, understandably protective of our family, threatened to call the police if she did not leave immediately. In the midst of all this chaos, I found myself searching online for divorce lawyers, overwhelmed with emotion and feeling utterly lost. I believe I have been in a state of shock, but once I arrived at my parents' house, the pain hit me hard. It is agonizing to read through her chats and to interact with her at all. I have only replied to her messages twice. In my first response, I made it clear that no matter what she says, she is not the person I once knew. I told her that my true wife would never hurt me in such a profound way while wearing a smile. I firmly stated that we would be getting a divorce and that she no longer has any influence over me. I reminded her that we are finished, and that she is not my wife anymore. I don't recognize her anymore. My wife would never subject our children to the heartbreak of growing up in a broken home. It seems that she is proud of what she has done, and I can't comprehend it. The last message I sent was a harsh reflection of what I felt. She used to be loving, caring, and my best friend, while now she has become someone who is self-absorbed and detached from the pain that she is causing. After that last message, the communication stopped abruptly. The pain of this situation is sometimes completely unbearable. In moments of despair, I find myself wishing this had never happened, longing for a return to the way things were before, but deep down, I know I cannot do that to myself. This holiday season is turning out to be the worst Christmas I have ever experienced. In a moment of weakness, I explained to my children that their mother does not want to be a family anymore, that she has chosen to be with other men. Naturally, they were distraught. Thankfully, my parents are here to support us, showering the kids with love and attention while I am in shambles. I intend to get back on my feet for the sake of my children, but I have no intention of returning to her ever again. I regret that I spoke to the kids about our situation so soon. I wish I had waited until after Christmas to help them settle into counseling. I don't know what came over me, it just slipped out when they asked about when they would see their mother again. I would never be able to forgive myself if I went back to her. The level of disrespect and callousness in her behavior is simply unforgivable. I feel completely lost and cannot understand why she believes she still has the right to demand anything from me at this point. I question whether she is mentally unwell or something beyond explanation. In a side note, I realized that I am okay with monitoring the situation. I spoke with a lawyer who is a friend of mine, and he reassured me that since the phone and subscription are in my name, I am within my rights to monitor my own equipment. This brings some relief during this turbulent time. Since my last update, more events have unfolded. I wish I could say I handled everything with strength, but I have been a wreck, crying and unable to function properly. I became obsessed with reading my wife's chats with her friends, and what I discovered was shocking and hurtful. The culmination of my emotional turmoil hit me hard when my soon-to-be ex-wife expressed in harsh terms that her marriage and even her children had become burdens in her life. She claimed they had held her back from achieving her goals, preventing her from being the successful woman she always wanted to be. She described me as an oppressive figure, claiming I stifled her potential and aspirations. The things she said shattered me, and I felt completely broken inside. I spent hours poring over every word in emails and chats, struggling to make sense of the situation. I dedicated the next 30 or so hours to methodically reading and rereading every email and chat we had exchanged. I reflected on each line multiple times, hoping to find some clarity in the situation. In her messages, she made sweeping statements about how we were burdens or oppressors, yet she failed to provide any specific details or examples to support her claims. This lack of concrete argument struck me as odd. In reality, I had never stopped her from pursuing any of her interests or goals. On the contrary, I covered most of our expenses, and her part-time job pay barely amounted to a living wage. I had always encouraged and supported her hobbies, dreams, and aspirations, even in the face of her consistent poor performance in school, where she would frequently drop classes after receiving failing grades. I made it a point to express my love for her daily and show appreciation for all she contributed to our family. I took her out on dates and made myself available whenever she needed support. If what she described as oppression was accurate, then I would gladly take on more of it. At some point during this exhausting reflective process, I found myself completely worn out and fell asleep. When I woke up, I realized my 3 best friends were in the kitchen with my dad preparing dinner. I had known these guys since childhood, so I'll refer to them as Mike, Bob, and Frank. My dad had invited them over and filled them in on the situation. Once I saw them, I broke down emotionally all over again and felt completely lost until Friday evening rolled around. Mike, who is a former military personnel and lost his left arm below the elbow, had been through a tough recovery after his wife left him during that time. Fortunately, they did not have any children, and Mike has since adopted 2 kids and started a relationship with a lovely girlfriend a few years back. He seemed to be doing well now. During our time together, he set up a Zoom call with his counselor, a person who had helped him significantly during his recovery journey. Even though his counselor specialized in amputees, he offered valuable insights and helped me understand my own emotional turmoil. He explained that many wives unfortunately abandon their husbands when they face injuries, using Mike's experiences as examples. This information helped me see my situation more clearly. The counselor prompted me to view my identity as being deeply intertwined with my marriage and role as a husband. Since that part of me feels lost now, I experience a sense of phantom pain similar to what amputees endure after losing a limb. We spent hours in conversation, and I felt a steady improvement in my emotional state. Bob, my other friend, works as an executive at Summit Security Company. He tends to be reserved about discussing his job, and I don't have a clear understanding of what he actually does, but he is quite well off. Bob took the initiative to contact a law firm that his company has on retainer. By Sunday morning, I found myself speaking with a lawyer that I could never imagine affording. Bob reassured me not to worry about the legal fees, he offered to cover the costs. This gesture meant a lot, especially since Bob had been someone I often defended against bullies during our school days. Frank, the last of my trio of friends, works as a teacher in a private school and has a large family with 7 kids. Yes, that's right, 7. My own children adore him as well as the rest of his family. While I struggled to regain my footing, Frank made an effort to ensure my kids were well taken care of during this chaotic time. Yesterday was particularly hectic. I began the day with an early appointment for STD screening, and it turned out that I had contracted chlamydia. I was told I would need to undergo another screening in 6 months. This unexpected news shifted my mood from self-pity to intense anger. I felt justified in cutting off any kind of support for her. I was determined to give her nothing if I could help it. The lawyer had also managed to track down the ex-husband of my wife's feminist friend, who had openly spoken about how she had mistreated him. It was surprisingly easy for the lawyer to find him through court documents. I contacted him via WhatsApp, and while he expressed gratitude for my outreach, he shared harrowing stories of the treatment he endured. Hearing about his experiences was disturbing, but it also prepared me for the battle ahead with my soon-to-be ex-wife. I now understood the gravity of my situation from a new perspective, having learned that he had faced homelessness and had barely seen his children for 4 years, all due to falsehood spread by his ex-wife. I acknowledged the disadvantages I face as a man within the court system, but I was determined to gather as much evidence as possible to prepare for what lay ahead. I am gathering a substantial amount of evidence because my lawyer has recommended that I take a strong defensive step by filing for a restraining order. This decision arises from my soon-to-be ex-wife's negative and aggressive remarks about men in general. It is crucial for our son to grow up in a balanced household. Exposing him to an openly anti-male parental figure can be quite harmful to his development. Therefore, I am pursuing full custody of our children. I have instructed my lawyer to proceed with filing the necessary documents, and she anticipates that my ex-wife will be served with the restraining order later today. Earlier, I had a Zoom call with my soon-to-be ex-wife. It is worth noting that she has not reached out to me since the last confrontation at our door, where she argued with my father. Since then, she has not attempted to contact our children or anyone else in the family, which clearly indicates a lack of concern for any of us. During the call, I found her behavior to be very strange. She was heavily made up and dressed to impress, showcasing an exaggerated appearance that I hadn't seen in years. It felt as if she was trying too hard to look great for the conversation. Throughout our discussion, she made several attempts to provoke me into an argument, hoping to get a rise out of me. However, I successfully maintained my composure, largely due to my lawyer's advice on how to navigate these conversations. It is generally viewed positively in divorce proceedings when one party makes an effort to resolve issues amicably before escalating the situation to a contested divorce. The entire call was recorded for documentation purposes. Despite the tension, I remained focused on our divorce proceedings and avoided engaging with her provocations. At one point, she made a bizarre comment about different types of penises, stating that one type stays the same size regardless of its state, while the other type changes size. It was a confusing way to start a conversation, and when she mentioned her excitement about going out to explore this topic further once restrictions were lifted, I made it clear that I had no interest in discussing her personal hobbies. I insisted we needed to talk about our divorce. Her hostility grew when I refused to take the bait and lose my temper. At one point, she muted herself to go to the bathroom, but I could see her speaking with her friends. Throughout the call, she made multiple derogatory remarks, often directed at me simply for being a man. I got the strong impression that she viewed this entire situation as a competition, believing she was in control and that I had no choice but to accept whatever demands she put forth. Ultimately, we made no real progress in discussing the divorce, which led me to conclude that we would indeed be heading towards a contested divorce. I mentioned to her that I had been tested for sexually transmitted infections, implying that she should do the same, given her behavior. Her reaction was to frown and dismiss my words, which only added to my belief that her mental state is questionable. People around me are increasingly voicing their concerns about her behavior, and it is evident that she is struggling. I have been meticulous about documenting everything, including using chat logs from her phone, which I legally own. These records can serve as additional evidence should it come to that in court. After the call, the conversation among her friends was frantic, but I've reached a point where I no longer care about what they discuss. My lawyer is optimistic about our chances in this situation, as long as there are no surprises from my end. Despite the emotional toll this situation has taken on me, I am determined to press forward with strength. I recognize that this is not just about me, it is about protecting my children and ensuring their well-being. I am committed to getting them the therapy they need, as much as they want it. I envision a future where my soon-to-be ex-wife is a distant memory, and I can start building a better life for myself and my kids. Recently, I discovered that she was aware of the infection but chose not to inform me, which is deeply troubling. She seemed to find humor in the situation while chatting with her new friends, which is unacceptable. The realization that she has caused so much turmoil in our family, and especially during significant times like Christmas, leaves me questioning how she expects me to accept her behavior. I have received comments suggesting that I am strong or somehow winning in this ordeal, but reading my own accounts reveals the anger I feel towards this whole situation. I may appear confident and composed on the outside, but the reality is far different. Inside, I am grappling with profound pain and regret. I often find myself wishing that this entire ordeal had never occurred. I long for the days when my family was whole, when I could envision a future filled with tranquility, sharing simple moments with my wife as we watch our children grow and eventually embark on their own journeys. Right now, no one emerges victorious from this situation. My wife, once a loving partner, has spiraled into a state of chaos. It feels as though everything around us is crumbling, as if the train of our lives is derailing and burning in a ditch. I am at a loss trying to understand what has changed in her. Despite her apparent disregard for the turmoil she has caused, she refuses to seek help from medical professionals who could address her possible mental health issues. She acts as if her behavior is perfectly acceptable, showing no signs of remorse or acknowledgement of the harm done. Instead, it seems she believes I am being unreasonable for not simply accepting her choices, no matter how damaging they may be. Her attitude has strained her relationship with our children. Since that fateful day, often referred to as D-Day, she has hardly made any effort to connect with them. I have made the difficult decision to initiate divorce proceedings, moving forward with the separation of our lives. Her actions have left me no choice, there is no going back from this point. The trust that once existed has been shattered beyond repair. Every night, as I lie in bed, I find myself crying for my own losses and mourning the reality that my children will now grow up in a fractured home. What pains me even more is the thought of how my children perceive their mother. How do I answer their innocent questions, like, why doesn't mommy want to see me anymore? Doesn't she love me? I struggle with these difficult conversations, feeling utterly unprepared to provide them with the answers they deserve. Each morning, I remind myself that my heart can't possibly break any more than it already has, yet somehow, it does. My wife continues to live in her bubble, unaware or indifferent to the fact that I can monitor her communications. She seems to be convinced that I will never leave her, viewing my reactions to her actions as entirely unjustified. Meanwhile, she has taken to speaking poorly about me to her friends, disparaging our marriage and our children. It leaves me baffled. I can't fathom why she harbors such animosity towards us when we haven't wronged her in the ways she claims. In legal matters, a temporary restraining order was granted against her, though at a recent hearing, it was not extended because no new threats surfaced. My lawyer has suggested that I use my wife's actions to leverage an uncontested divorce. I wish desperately that we could navigate this process with some semblance of reason. It pains me to view her as an adversary and to always anticipate the worst outcomes. If she truly wanted to part ways, I could accept that. However, the way she seems to actively seek to hurt those who once cared for her is incomprehensible. What does she gain from this? Financially, if we proceed to court, I might face significant expenses, including paying her for the equity in our home. While I may not be liable for alimony, and given her lack of interest in our children, I hold on to hope that I could gain custody if it goes to court. My lawyer recommended that we pursue a more amicable divorce, and I have agreed to meet with my soon-to-be ex-wife and her representative in the hopes of reaching a resolution. I have a friend who feels similarly to me, having been betrayed by his ex-wife, who has had a disastrous impact on his life and relationship with his children. The bias against fathers within the justice system is disheartening. My friend has faced a reality where he hardly sees his children and is burdened with excessive alimony and child support payments. It has taken a toll on him. However, with new evidence I have provided, he has found renewed hope. We have communicated with my lawyer, who has suggested he wait to present this evidence until our upcoming meeting. If he acts too soon, it may reveal that we have access to their communications, which could hurt our case. The ultimate objective of my lawyer is to expedite the divorce process, allowing both of us to begin our lives anew as quickly as possible. My lawyer's primary objective is to expedite the divorce process between my wife and me, aiming for a resolution as quickly and smoothly as possible. At this moment, my greatest hope is to distance myself from her. However, there is a looming concern. If she decides to contest the divorce, the proceedings could extend for a lengthy period, adding to my stress and anxiety. The weight of this situation is overwhelming, and all I desire is the freedom that comes with finalizing the divorce. I will keep you updated if I manage to schedule a meeting or if we find ourselves heading into a contested court process. The circumstances surrounding my marriage are dire. My wife's infidelity has shattered our family and ruined what should have been a joyful Christmas. It is baffling to me that she expects me to accept her behavior without question. Unfortunately, the strange situation continues to unfold. Just yesterday afternoon, there was a meeting that included my lawyer and my soon-to-be ex-wife. She arrived 30 minutes late, and rather than bringing her own lawyer, she showed up with one of her new friends, who I can only describe as a toxic presence. Before the meeting, my lawyer had given me clear, strict instructions on how to conduct myself. I was told to avoid any negative reactions to anything said by my wife or her friend. If they addressed me, I was to respond in a calm and non-confrontational manner, or positively if possible. In particular, my lawyer emphasized that if she placed both hands flat on the table, I should refrain from speaking altogether. As expected, my wife and her friend showed up without masks and with an agenda to provoke me. The so-called friend aimed to insult me and provoke a reaction in any way she could imagine. My wife joined in, making similar attempts. Meanwhile, my lawyer was trying to steer the conversation back to the primary issue at hand, our divorce. Instead, they spent their time laughing and joking about their insults directed at me, which was incredibly uncomfortable to witness. It became increasingly evident that my wife is still living in a delusional state, believing that this entire situation is merely a facade. In her mind, I cannot divorce her unless she allows it. If she decides to do so, she seems to think she will walk away with everything. I sat there, utterly confused, unable to comprehend what was happening. I barely contributed to the conversation, only responding occasionally with vague phrases like, "Yes, you are probably right," or "I really don't know." Eventually, after some back and forth, my lawyer seized the moment and began discussing the proposed settlement for an amicable divorce. One of her opening statements was that I was willing to offer a considerable sum of $60,000 to my wife as a lump sum payment covering equity in our home and other investments. The moment the amount was mentioned, my wife, alongside her friend, became overly excited. My wife immediately inquired about where she needed to sign, disregarding my lawyer's attempts to go over the rest of the agreement first. Despite my lawyer's insistence on reviewing the entire settlement, my wife was insistent about signing right away and began asking when she could expect the payment. They seemed eager to leave for a pub. At this point, my lawyer quietly contacted someone, and suddenly, there was a flurry of activity. An older woman approached us, requesting our identification documents. We were then asked to sign 2 copies of the agreement. Once we finished, the woman stamped the documents, and I later discovered that she was a notary. My lawyer, visibly relieved, thanked my wife and her friend, indicating that our meeting was complete. They left, and interestingly, my wife forgot to take her copy of the signed agreement with her, leaving it on the table. As they walked out, my lawyer glanced at me and appeared to want me to hold my tongue until they were gone. Once we could see them cross the parking lot, my lawyer congratulated me and shared her thoughts on how unusual this session had been for a divorce negotiation. She informed me that her plan was to send my wife her copy of the agreement after we have a hearing in front of the judge, or if my wife gets a lawyer and requests it. Until then, it will remain in my lawyer's drawer. On the surface, it seems that the divorce process may proceed far more smoothly than I initially anticipated. However, my wife still has the option to hire legal representation and dispute this agreement. My lawyer assured me that she would utilize all the resources at her disposal to secure a prompt hearing with a judge, likely through a video call. In addition to my legal preparations, I have also hired a private investigator, thanks to advice received on Reddit. The investigator has gathered photographic evidence that may be vital for my case. After receiving advice from Reddit, I decided to hire a private investigator. The results were shocking. The investigator captured photos of my wife engaging in intimate moments with 2 different men at separate bars just yesterday. To make things worse, she even went to a hotel with one of them. This discovery has left me with a considerable amount of evidence should I need it in the future. I can only hope that this evidence will suffice if the situation escalates. My wife has agreed to a custody arrangement that grants me full custody of our children, with a one-time payment of $60,000. There will be no spousal support or any additional payments. Once I secure the funds, I will finally be free from this difficult situation. Bob, a trusted friend, has offered to help me cover the entire amount if necessary. Despite the overwhelming nature of these events, I still find it hard to believe that this is happening. I anticipate that my wife will resort to using an aggressive lawyer, who may accuse me of serious allegations such as child molestation and domestic abuse. My lawyer advised me to maintain a low profile during this entire process. I must continue to pay for all the regular expenses and avoid stirring any controversy. The best advice I received was to refrain from discussing this with anyone we know, to keep my distance and remain quiet until the hearing date. Essentially, I need to take no action and wait as patiently as possible for the upcoming legal proceedings. As I sit here, I can only hope for a positive outcome. An update to my situation reveals that my wife's infidelity has shattered our family, especially during what should be a joyful Christmas season. How could she expect me to accept her actions? The hearing I mentioned took place yesterday. While the divorce won't be finalized for 4 to 6 months as the paperwork is processed, the decision has essentially been made. There is little anyone can do to alter the outcome unless my wife and I jointly choose to put a stop to it. This situation has drained me. I'm utterly exhausted and haven't slept well in what feels like days. If my thoughts seem scattered, it's understandable given the emotional turmoil I'm experiencing. I need to express these feelings and, hopefully, I can find some peace after writing this all down. My lawyer managed to secure an early hearing just 12 days after the paperwork was submitted, which was quite impressive. I suspect she may have called in some favors to expedite the process. The last few days have been a whirlwind of events. On Friday morning, a large group of police officers arrived at my home with a search warrant. I felt incredibly confused and worried about my children during this unexpected visit. Fortunately, they allowed me to take the kids outside while they conducted their search. Although they didn't provide much information at the time, I did manage to get a copy of the warrant. I was left shaken and struggling to process the situation. It seems the speculation regarding my ex-wife's behavior potentially being drug-related might hold some truth. The police proceeded to search my home thoroughly. I called my lawyer, who spoke to the officers about the situation, but they affirmed that the warrant was legitimate, so there wasn't much we could do. Looking back, I realized that I have installed cameras in my home for security, intending to protect myself from any false accusations in the future. I now have video and audio evidence of everything that occurs in my home, which gives me some reassurance. Nevertheless, I am uncertain if I even have the strength to pursue any claims if necessary. Perhaps it's better to simply move on. As the chaotic events unfolded, I learned that my ex-wife and 3 friends had taken my car without permission while under the influence of drugs and alcohol. They crashed into a house at high speed, resulting in their arrests. All 4 individuals were found to be intoxicated and in possession of illegal substances. Tragically, one of the passengers is in critical condition and her survival is uncertain. The main instigator, whom I'll refer to as Henrietta, boasted about how she manipulated the legal system against her own ex-husband, who I'll call Henry. Interestingly, Henry and I have grown closer as we share similar experiences. Fortunately, during the search, the police did not discover anything incriminating in my home. I made sure to clarify that my ex-wife no longer resides with me and that I had not authorized anyone to use my car. Once back inside my home, I was overwhelmed by emotions and broke down in tears. The damage was extensive, and everything looked completely trashed. This felt like the final blow after everything I had endured. In desperation, I reached out to my father, who promptly came over and took my children and me to stay with my parents. Meanwhile, he gathered a group of 26 friends and family members to support us during this difficult time while I sobbed on the back porch, trying to process the wreckage of my life. While I was sitting on the back porch, crying and eating my mom's delicious comfort food, feeling sad for myself, something incredible happened. People came together to completely clean and fix my entire house. They took care of every single room, handling things like washing the dishes and doing the laundry. They even moved the furniture around and cleaned the ceilings and walls. It had never been this clean before. They also fixed all the little things that I had ignored for too long, like loose door handles and squeaky hinges. I was amazed that they would go to such lengths for me. I felt overwhelmed with gratitude and had no idea how I could ever repay their kindness. Over that weekend, I went from feeling suicidal to actually feeling quite good, and it was all thanks to their support. In the midst of all this, some serious issues were happening with Henrietta. The police found more drugs at her house, and her boyfriend wasn't there, leaving the kids home alone with no babysitter. Because of this, Child Protective Services took the kids, and Henry was granted temporary emergency custody after he showed the judge the evidence, including chat logs, the situation of abandonment, and the piles of drugs found in her home. He got custody quite easily, and he was absolutely ecstatic. Henry hadn't seen his kids in nearly 5 years, and he had been working hard to raise money to fight Henrietta in court. Now, with this development, he still needs to go to court to make the custody arrangement permanent, but the chances look really good. Everyone believes that Henrietta will face serious consequences, especially if her friend doesn't make it through this situation. After this, Henry plans to seek child support and compensation for everything suffering that Henrietta caused, but he doesn't expect much from that. He seems more focused on being with his kids and making sure they can have a good life, especially since it has become clear that Henrietta has been very neglectful toward them. Bob has been incredibly supportive and helped Henry find a rental apartment through one of his friends. Interestingly, I have realized that I don't really know much about Bob's personal or work life, and I intend to change that. Now, getting back on track, Henrietta had been driving recklessly and crashed into a house, leaving everyone involved pretty banged up. Because of the circumstances, including the drugs and alcohol found at the scene, search warrants were issued for everyone's homes. It's worth noting that Henrietta was still registered as living at my house. With everything that was happening, I made the decision on Sunday to sell my house and move away as quickly as possible. I had a strong fear that something like this might happen again. On Sunday, I received a call from Henrietta's parents. Their house was also searched. They had visited her in jail the day before and now didn't trust anything she told them. They came over to talk, and it turned out that she had been lying to them about everything. During the night she had been out partying and cheating. She told her parents that she was staying with me, leading them to believe we were trying to work things out. They had no clue about the reality of her actions or the impact they had on me and the kids. While they were aware of her cheating, they thought it was a mistake made during a night of drinking. On Monday, my wife called me asking for help to post her bail, which was set at $15,000. Her parents had already told her they wouldn't assist her. After discussing the situation with my lawyer, she prepared some paperwork stating that the bail would be deducted from any settlement until she appeared in court and the bail was released. This agreement also included her mother as the custodian of the remaining bail money. My lawyer wanted to ensure that my wife had no excuses for not attending the hearing, which is why she was eager for me to get her released. My wife, didn't have much choice but to sign the paperwork, and she was released on Monday afternoon. According to her parents, she refused to follow the rules they set for her to continue living in their house. These rules included stopping drug use, committing to rehab, and being open about her activities. It seemed that she left their house just a couple of days later to stay with some of her new friends. She did not show up for the scheduled hearing, and after reviewing all the evidence and events from the weekend, the judge granted me full custody of our kids. The agreement we made was quick and only took about 30 minutes. While it will take about 4 to 6 months to go through all the paperwork, the reality is that the custody battle is essentially over. There isn't really anything she can do to stop this process now. And that brings us to today. Today marks a significant moment in my life, but it is not one filled with joy or celebration. Last night, I found myself unable to sleep. People around me were offering congratulations, treating me as if I had achieved some tremendous victory, yet deep down, I felt the exact opposite. It doesn't feel like I've won anything at all. Instead, I am overwhelmed by pain and loss. I still hold love for my wife, even though I know our relationship has come to an end and there is no going back. She was not just my partner, she was my best friend and my soulmate until recently. Despite the fact that my love for her feels deeply wounded, it remains with me, and that reality hurts intensely. There are no winners in this situation. I am losing my wife, my children are losing their mother, and in many ways, we are all losing a part of ourselves. I find it nearly impossible to communicate the depth of my feelings. It feels as though I am being asked to celebrate the fact that I have lost both my legs. In this twisted analogy, because I took action to save what I could, one leg is lost only below the knee while the other is gone above. When people congratulate me, it feels akin to them praising me for managing to keep a small piece of what I once had, while I've lost everything else. This restless night has led to terrible nightmares that wake me, leaving me drenched in a cold sweat. My internal turmoil is hard to articulate, but it is real and weighs heavily on me. Despite this, today brought an unexpected call from the hospital notifying me that my ex-wife is hospitalized. I am still listed as her emergency contact and she remains on my health insurance. The news is grim. There has been an altercation resulting in her losing teeth and suffering a broken jaw, and she will require a few days for observation. Upon arriving at the hospital with her parents, I learned that she had been beaten badly by some of her new friends. It seems that word had circulated that Henry had chat logs from Henrietta, where she boasted about what she had done to him using my wife's phone. Her friends assumed that my wife had shared these logs with Henry, which led to her being brutally attacked and kicked out by them. Ironically, despite the circumstances, my ex-wife remains unaware that I can still access and monitor her phone. I intend to maintain this support, covering her insurance and phone, until I have the divorce papers in my possession. Until then, I will not believe it is truly over. She is left with nothing now. When she asked if she could move back home, I firmly told her that there was no way that was happening. Her mother is also not willing to help her financially unless she gets clean and stays sober for at least a year. They have offered her the chance to live with them under strict terms, and if she refuses, I doubt how she will cope. For the first time since all of this began, I witnessed what appeared to be some form of regret from her. However, I suspect it is more about her realization that she can no longer continue her reckless lifestyle. She did manage to say, "I'm sorry I ruined everything," but I doubt the sincerity behind those words. During my visit, she hardly looked me in the eyes, and seeing her in this state was painful. I felt an instinctive urge to protect her, but she is an adult, and her actions have been dangerous and erratic. Most importantly, I have to prioritize the safety of my children. Throughout our encounter, she showed little interest in asking about the upcoming hearing or the condition of her critically injured friend. Instead, she seemed irritated. This lack of awareness and concern is baffling to me. She has lost everything, destroyed her family, and caused immense pain for many people, all for what? A thrill and some fleeting encounters? I have decided to cut off contact until she has proven that she can stay clean for an extended period. I cannot continue to deal with this chaotic situation. Many people have reached out to me for updates. I planned to share one yesterday, but the exhaustion and heaviness felt too overwhelming. I am battling depression and struggling with fatigue. Sleep eludes me, and when I do manage to rest, my nightmares return. On a brighter note, my children are doing better, and I owe a lot of that to my father, who has been my rock during this difficult time. This past weekend, we took the kids to his cabin to ski together, and that time spent has been rejuvenating for all of us. As for my ex, I have had minimal contact with her since the incident. I spoke with one of her friends who is still in critical condition. Fortunately, she has woken up, but remains in poor health. When I spoke with her nurse, she expressed sadness that no one had bothered to visit her during her stay. It appears that her family has refused to see her. I can't shake the worry that the individuals who attacked my ex might come after me and my children. Given the severity of the situation, I reached out to the nurse to discuss my concerns and to ensure our safety. I reached out through the nurse to see if I could speak with her, and she agreed. I knew I probably shouldn't be having this conversation, but I felt a strong need to understand what had happened since my wife began associating with this group. When I started talking to her, she caught me off guard by asking if I wanted a sexual favor for $20, which made the moment incredibly awkward. Instead, I proposed giving her $50 in exchange for information about my wife's situation. I learned that the friends my wife had become involved with were all deeply entrenched in drug addiction. Among them, Henrietta seemed to be the ringleader. She had convinced my wife to join their circle, even though two of the other women were against it. Henrietta encouraged my wife to try drugs and party with them, leading her down a dark path. Their group resorted to selling sexual favors to fund their drug habits. Although they claimed to advocate for feminist ideals regarding bodily autonomy, Henrietta candidly explained that their actions were largely about protecting their own fragile egos. The reality was that they were effectively prostituting themselves to support their addictions. My wife quickly became addicted, just like the others. As time passed, her situation worsened, and she eventually began selling sex to sustain her drug use. It was heart-wrenching for me to come to terms with the fact that the woman I loved more than anything had turned herself into someone unrecognizable, all in pursuit of her addiction. It became clear why her main focus was on getting money. From what she shared, her drug of choice seemed to be methamphetamine. The absence of visitors was telling. She had stolen, manipulated, and hurt everyone in her life, leading to complete alienation. During our conversation, she expressed a chilling lack of hope about her future. I found it devastating to observe her as she spoke, particularly when she described feeling sadness about surviving, as if her life held no value. Without her makeup, she appeared almost lifeless. It was painful to witness. Listening to her was excruciating, and I cried for the woman I once knew. I am not attempting to excuse her actions. She made choices that led her down this destructive path, and now she must face the consequences. She disclosed details about the violence she faced at the hands of certain men, which I plan to address later. On top of everything, Henrietta was in serious trouble with the law, facing charges that included making death threats, resisting arrest, drug possession, prostitution, drug trafficking, child abuse and neglect, DUI, property damage, and auto theft. She was denied bail as a flight risk, and I sincerely hope she will be incarcerated for a significant period. Before I continue with my story, I want to express my gratitude to those who reached out, sharing their experiences with addiction. Many people cautioned me that my ex-wife might attempt to take her own life as her situation deteriorated, and sadly, they were right. She made a rather deliberate attempt. Prior to this, I had spoken with her father about the risk, and we agreed to keep a close watch on her. Fortunately, she remains unaware that I have access to her phone's location through monitoring software. While at the cabin on Saturday, I received a chilling message from her that resembled a suicide note. In it, she spoke about her addiction and the sense of failure she felt for letting everyone down, expressing that she could only see one way out. I quickly called her father, and because I had her location, he rushed over to find her unconscious on a park bench. She was immediately taken to the hospital, where they had to treat her for hypothermia. I dread to think about what could have happened if he had arrived even a few minutes later. They placed her on methadone as a treatment. Her father has now stepped in as her legal guardian, which means she can no longer refuse treatment. He made the difficult decision to have her forcefully committed to a rehabilitation center where she will undergo a medically supervised detoxification process. I am uncertain of the exact timing, but it likely will occur within the week. The court granted her father guardianship not because of her drug use alone, but because she abandoned her children. This abandonment was viewed as evidence of her lack of rational decision-making, and sadly, her attempts on her own life were interpreted as a continuation of that irrationality. Amid this chaos, I was relieved that I hadn't yet cancelled her life insurance policy, ensuring she would receive treatment. To assist financially, I have offered my ex's father support, as long as my ex does not learn that I am involved. A significant concern on my part is the potential retaliation from the men who assaulted my wife. This is especially troubling since Henrietta presented chat logs in court that are believed to have originated from my wife. I discussed this with Henrietta, and she agreed to help resolve the situation since she had benefited from the information disclosed. As for Henrietta, she is an imposing figure, a muscular man who grew up on a farm, and there is a sense of anger about him that is hard to miss. It's a complicated web of relationships and emotions that I am trying to navigate while ensuring the safety of myself and my children. He spent his childhood on a farm, where he had to carry heavy things from a very young age. This upbringing gave him a physically imposing appearance, resembling that of a hawk. His build is such that he seems capable of tearing the average man apart with ease. When he walks, he often bends down to fit through doorways. His haircut is a crew cut, and he has some noticeable scars on his face. To anyone who does not know him, he presents a very intimidating presence. However, those who know him understand that he is quite the opposite. He is a deeply patient, gentle, and kind person. Though he is capable of using force when necessary, he prefers to avoid such actions unless absolutely required. Recently, he visited a man's apartment which can only be described as a terrible place. He confronted two men there, gripping them by the neck with surprising strength and informing them that Henrietta had shared the chat logs with him. He made it very clear that these men had hurt someone he cared about and that they now faced a choice. They could either accompany him to the police and confess everything related to the assault, or they could stand against him right there. He warned them that choosing the second option would lead to painful, lasting injuries. In his recounting of the event, he expressed a hope that they would choose to confront the police. As expected, the men were eager to escape, practically racing to the police station. With that situation resolved, I no longer have to worry about those men. I have found a new apartment and will be moving soon. Bob once again proved to be a reliable friend in a difficult time. However, the overall weight of recent events has left me feeling very down. This burden sits heavily on my spirit. The only things that give me strength are my friends and family. I realize I must stay strong for my children. My heart aches for my ex-wife, even with everything that has happened. Despite our troubles, I do not regret marrying her. A part of me still loves her, but I understand that we can never return to the way things were. She has changed, and there is too much pain between us now. Looking back, despite all the suffering, we had a good life together. If it weren't for her, I would not have my children, and I would never give them up for anything in the world. I know that healing will take time, and I hope I can gather the strength to get through it. Interestingly, the news of my wife's addiction has helped my children cope. It has become easier for them to talk about how she is sick and that it will take a long while for her to recover. They understand she still loves them, and that helps a lot. Right now, I feel sad and tired. Henry is here with his kids, and we are planning to watch Madagascar 3 together. I am trying my best to create as many positive memories as possible in this tough time. Henry is doing the same, and it looks like our kids are slowly getting better too. I believe we will be okay moving forward. This will likely be my last update. I have experienced a lot, including my wife's infidelity, which has shattered our family, especially over the holidays. I can't understand why she expected me to accept her actions without question. There was also tragic news about someone who passed away while in rehab. There is confusion over how this person even got drugs while in treatment. Some speculate that they might have swallowed a hidden bag that ruptured inside them. The situation remains unclear, and no one truly knows how it happened. Henceforth, I won't be posting updates or responding to comments. I want to thank everyone who offered support and helpful suggestions during this difficult time.